Welcome to the Gentleman's Guide to Gaming. I had a question the other day sent to me via MatthewDawkins.com. Always the place to go if you want to buy an RPG at a discount. I think most of the links on my resume page will take you through to DriveThruRPG or some other site where there should be a discount applied. If not, I apologise. Sometimes these links change or die or whatever, but give it a go. If you want to pick up an RPG, there are a lot listed there because I've worked on a lot of RPGs at this point. I was asked a question via MatthewDawkins.com. Someone was very kind enough to use the PayPal link to fire me over $20 and say, I don't suppose you could make a video about Requiem versus Masquerade. And I thought, maybe. Maybe I'll do that video in the future. But this question was specifically, why are you running Requiem and not Masquerade? So anyone who's been watching my videos on, what are you running and what games are you intending on running in 2025, you may have noticed that I haven't mentioned Vampire the Masquerade in any of them. I haven't mentioned Vampire the Dark Ages in any of them. But that until recently I was running 2 Chronicles of Vampire the Requiem, and right now I'm running 1. One of those Chronicles ended and is now a Chronicle of Curseborn, I think, yeah. And the other one is, well, still going. So I thought, I'll answer this question. It's nice and easy. And the answer is incredibly simple. I have been running Vampire the Masquerade pretty consistently since about the year 2000. I mean, there's obviously been gaps in between, but up until about 2023, I was either reading Vampire the Masquerade books, playing in Vampire the Masquerade, running Vampire the Masquerade in some venue or other. I might have been running it at a tabletop. I might have been playing in LARPs. I didn't do many, but I have done some. I might have been playing in a rare tabletop game. I might have been running it online over Google Hangouts. I might have been part of the VTM YTE, the Vampire the Masquerade YouTube experiments that some people remember quite fondly. I was very heavily involved. Vampire pretty much defined my role-playing experience. I always found time to play other things and run other things, but Vampire was a constant for well over 20 years for me. And then, of course, add into that the fact that I worked on it. I wrote on it, I developed books for it for several years as well, since 2014. I want to say. I think that's when I started working on the True Black Hand book, which was my first Vampire the Masquerade writing assignment. So that was a lot of Vampire. And I got to a point with Vampire the Masquerade where I realized I was kind of spinning my wheels, both in my plots. I think the players still enjoyed the Chronicles I was running, but I was no longer enjoying them quite so much. I feel like over the course of 20 years, I think I've seen pretty much every permutation of every Chronicle that I could come up with. I'm sure there are plenty of ideas that you have come up with that I haven't. Almost every single character type. I mean, it would ultimately become something of a joke, not a cruel one, when a player would suggest a character concept excitedly in a way to say, I bet you've never heard of a concept like this. And I guess the 50th time you've heard of the last Salubri or the last Cappadocian or a Gargoyle, or it's not always Bloodlines, of course, you end up thinking, nah, you know what, I have heard everything. And often character concepts come down to, are you going to lean into the archetype, or are you going to lean against the archetype, or rather push away from it? So I'm going to play a Vendru Biker. Yep, and that'll probably be a lot of fun. But when it came down to it, I think I have explored the world of darkness through Vampire the Masquerade a lot. A hell of a lot. In almost every conceivable way. And so, yeah, I got to about 2023, I think, is when I ended my last Dark Ages game. And just thought, I'm done with Vampire for quite some time. I don't really want to run it anymore. There are so many other games I could be running. And then, of course, I fall into running Vampire the Requiem and I fall into running Curseborn. But what I've found really interesting about running Vampire the Requiem, and it's something I didn't credit Requiem with, oddly, because I've always loved Requiem. I remember I've spoken before about my excitement when I first bought Vampire the Requiem, how madly enthusiastic I was for it. I just absolutely loved that big red book. I loved the art style. I loved the way it communicated the horror within it. I immediately got to planning my first New World of Darkness game, Chronicles of Darkness now, of course. And that love affair never really went away, but because Masquerade was always, I guess, the big fish, I always had players who requested Masquerade over Requiem, not even before I had a Patreon. So now I'm running Requiem, and I'm getting to explore Requiem via Las Vegas, as I mentioned before, and it is, of course, an Intercovenant plot. The characters in my game are split between the Lonquea et Sanctum and the Circle of the Crone, which is a very interesting coterie mix-up that you wouldn't see in Masquerade. That's the thing. I think by early 2023, I was pretty convinced I am done with vampires for a long time. I have seen everything vampires have to show me. And then I started looking at Requiem again, and I started thinking, but there's actually these stories I could tell. There's this covenant I could use, this bloodline I could use, this plot I could explore. And it's really a mental wall more than a physical one, because a lot of these plots could be explored in the World of Darkness. A lot of these plots can be explored in Curseborn as well. It all depends on the kind of flavour you're looking for. And Vampire the Requiem has a certain flavour of personal horror, of urban fantasy, of realpolitik, which I find lacking in Masquerade, and my players really seem to jive off of. What they are really getting on with in this game of Requiem that I'm running right now is the human side of things, which I know V5 pushes quite well at, but Requiem, of course, did it first with Touchstones, which of course got ported over to V5, but we have one character, an incredibly nervous character who is a member of the Circle of the Crone, always speaks the truth, utterly cannot tell lies, and is always stumbling, tripping over his words, very anxious about his existence as a vampire. And he has had this really sweet relationship with a mortal lady who he happens to bump into in the library, and she had read a paper that he had written back when he was a mortal academic, and they just hit it off. And then she got a phone call. Her husband had been taken to hospital, and so then he gave her a ride to the hospital to see her. And it felt like the time we were taking for this kind of story just didn't really exist within the Masquerade world I had set up in my head. And Requiem completely allows it. Another player, their character is a Dampier, using the Requiem rules in, I want to say, is it Half Damned? Yeah, Half Damned is the book I should know because I wrote on it. But it was quite some time ago. Who has a vampire for a father and a ghoul for a mother. And her relationship with her mother is really interesting because they've got this business-like relationship. It's very cool, it's very professional, and then there's these occasional flashes of concern, of humanity again. And yeah, you can definitely explore these things in Masquerade. There is nothing stopping you. And I'd say Curseborn is completely drenched in the human side. The accursed feel a lot more human than superheroes with fangs. But Requiem is striking a nice balance for this particular group, and it is inspiring me. It inspires me to run stories. I'm really enjoying looking back through lots of Requiem books like, well, Damnation City, the Clan books, even Requiem for Rome, even though this is a contemporary era game. I'm loving looking at these books, and even some of the lesser known ones. I guess some of the forgotten Requiem books, like one of the first ones was Nomads, which I really like. Coteries, which I think is a perfectly solid book. Maybe not an initial release book as it was, but there's some really good material in Requiem first and second edition. And I have just so enjoyed switching from Masquerade to Requiem. I'm sure I will at some point go back to Masquerade, I've no doubt. I'm sure that I haven't told my last Masquerade story. But for the time being, it isn't like I am dogmatically against Vampire the Masquerade. Far from it. It's just I've ran it for over 20 years in one way, shape, or form, with very little break in between. I made videos about it. I didn't even talk about that, though. I was making videos about Masquerade for years. And yeah, Requiem represents a change for me. Curseborn represents a change for me, but one where you also have your shapeshifters and your sorcerers and your outcasts, your demon-like creatures, and so on in there as well. So I'm just really embracing, haha, the change in tone, in style, in content that Requiem and Curseborn provide me, and that Masquerade, I think, dried up a little for me. So, yeah, there's your answer. That is why I am running Requiem now instead of Masquerade. Is it going to be that way forever? I don't know. I couldn't say. I doubt it. But for the time being, at least, I am getting a lot of enjoyment out of Requiem. Running second edition, using a lot of material from both editions, and of course running Curseborn as well. So I'm getting plenty of horror over here. But thank you very much for the question, and I will see you next time.